Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can see me on the Framing the Future webinar program. You've joined the right place. If you're here, I want to welcome all of you. My name is Gary Allen, and I'm the president of the Maryland Forestry Foundation. It's our pleasure to welcome you to the 32nd webinar in the Framing the Future series. And this being Earth Month, we have an absolutely wonderful program talking about a program that originated, believe it or not, in the state of Maryland. It's nearly 100 years old. As a matter of fact, it'll celebrate its 100th anniversary just next year, the Maryland Big Tree Program, which has since gone national, and they'll be filling you in the details. I want to again welcome all of you, remind you that this program is being recorded and will be available on the Maryland Forestry Foundation.org website in early May, as are all of our past webinars for those of you who are interested in previous topics. Remember, the program is offered each third Thursday of every month on a variety of topics that frame the future of forestry decision, program, and policy in the state of Maryland. We've been pleased to have as our moderator for this entire series our very first Mel Fellow, Megan Carr. It's my pleasure to introduce Megan, who is an urban forester for the city of Baltimore. Megan, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. As always, happy to be here and looking forward to an excellent discussion today. Before we get started, just a couple brief housekeeping notes. We welcome questions from those of you in our audience, so please feel free to add those at any time. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. You just enter those in there and we'll have time set aside at the end of today's session for our speakers to answer any of your burning questions. Very excited today to finally be joined by folks representing the Maryland Big Tree Program, which is a phenomenal engagement tool and a repository of a ton of information on important trees that are crucial parts of Maryland's natural history, and also really useful tools for informing research and many other applications that our speakers will be telling you about today. So very pleased to introduce our two speakers, Julie McCatherine and Jim Bardsley. Julie McCatherine serves as co-chair of the Maryland Big Tree Program. She is a member and treasurer of the Montgomery County Forestry Board and the Champion Tree Coordinator for Montgomery County. She's a board member of the Maryland Forestry Foundation and is president of the Maryland Association of Forestry Boards. Julie belongs to the National Cadre of Tree Measurers. She is also mayor emeritus of the town of Washington Grove, and she resides in Washington Grove with her husband, where her hobbies include camping, sewing, canning produce, and playing with her grandsons. We're also joined by Jim Bardsley, who serves as a dendrologist, tree measurer, and member of the Big Tree Committee. He serves on the Caroline County Forestry Board and is also former president and executive committee member of the Maryland State Forestry Board Association, serves on the board of directors for the Maryland Forestry Foundation, and is a former faculty member in urban and community forestry at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. So very pleased to have you both with us, and I will let you two take it away.
Okay, thank you. Jim and I put together a PowerPoint. We'd like to go through it, and we can share the screen. My husband's here to share the screen. Great. We thank you, Megan, and thanks to Gary as well. We want to welcome all our guests that are visiting today. And as Gary stated, we are about coming into our 100th year of the Maryland Big Tree Program. We were the only state that had it for a while, and it was established in 1925. So for our 100th year, we got a new logo that we just had commission for, and there it is in the middle of the screen. So you'll be seeing more of that in the future, but we'll get started with the rest. So, all right.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Well, welcome everybody, and I appreciate you tuning in. This is kind of like a dumb question to most people, I think, but it really matters. And it sets minimum size for a registry. So we talk about a tree, we talk about a perennial plant. That's a woody plant that is a single trunk, measuring at 4.5 feet above ground. We're looking at maybe 7 inches in circumference, or 2.25 inches in diameter, at least, and a height of at least 13 feet. This definition varies, but this is a good, rounding of what's out there, and this is pretty much what we follow when we go out in the field. Next slide.
All right, these are the goals of our program. This is why we do it, and we'll get into how and show you some big trees and national champions. But we, of course, we're identifying the largest of native species statewide. So we're only comparing oaks to white oaks, dogwoods to dogwoods, whatever kind of tree. And along that way, we find many historic trees, ones that have a history in all around this area with presidents and with the land being settled, et cetera, and so forth. We've created a database, so we register the trees. We can monitor their measuring and monitor their growth of those registered trees. We have to remeasure every 10 years to keep them in the program. If we don't measure them, then they come out of the program until they're measured again, or we've proven that the tree is no longer there. Any tree that's nominated is eligible to the National Register of Champion Trees. This was for many years held by American Forest, but just this beginning of this year, it was turned over to the University of Tennessee for the National Champion Tree Program. And they are working on putting together their final list. They hope to have it out in the fall, and we can start sending in nominations again. And anyone can send in a nomination, but it will direct you to me because I'm the state coordinator, and it always says, make sure you talk to your state coordinator. So that's there too. And of course, we want to educate the public. So we maintain the we do our own website, and we maintain the trees there for public education. So those are our basic goals.
Yeah. And I would add to that, as a fringe benefit, the Maryland Big Tree Program is promoting sustainability and conservation of trees. And this has a much broader impact on the state's forest than just someone's backyard. But it gets people interested in trees. And that's what makes this so exciting to me, to go out and make a homeowner or landowner happy that they got a tree that makes the registry, and they want to know what to do to take care of it and all this. And it does have an effect on, I think, on forestry in general. And getting back to forestry, Fred Besley, of course, is the first forester. And he was the one that came up with the formula for measuring big trees. And that is the circumference in inches is converted to points. The height in feet is converted to points, and then 1/4 inch of the average crown spread. Added to that, you have total points. So it's a good way of comparing trees of the same species with each other, and it makes large trees really stand out. And it's incredible to see how big a registry has gotten over the years. So a little bit of history. The next slide, please. So I don't know if you can all read that. I have trouble reading it. But so we go back and you could go over, you could see where I'm going. But from the beginnings of Besley's career in 1904, he was a very motivated person. And he accomplished a lot. We owe him a lot in forestry in Maryland. Of course, he founded the Big Tree Program. If you go all the way to the end, in 1925, and if you go back a little bit, what happened was he wanted to have a contest for the state parks and for visitors that attended the state parks. And in 1922. The state parks there was a lot of them in Maryland by then. I think he started in 1912, and by 1922, so a decade of opening up all these state parks across Maryland. And he wanted to come up with a way to make people interested in looking at the trees and motivate them to come to the parks. So he devised this little pamphlet, which I'm going to go into in a second. And it's dated 1922, the Maryland State Forestry Board, and it set the stage for the Big Tree Program, which, like I said, became a contest for his state parks, and it just opened up to it. In a number of years, it became a big deal throughout Maryland. State park or people's backyards. It was important. What he had established. Can I have the next one, please? So here's a picture of the pamphlet, and this came from a private collection in Tallahassee, Florida. But you'll see it's dated 1922, and it talks about the purpose of the pamphlet. It doesn't really mention the state parks directly, but he mentions the Boy Scouts and this and that. And basically, what he wanted to do was hand these out in the state parks, and people would have a guide to look at 30 of the most common trees found in Maryland. And over the years, this pamphlet was reprinted and through the 1930s and 40s, and then it started to include the champion trees of Maryland. So if you've seen these around, I'm sure this is a rare one because there's not too many of these around now, because they got handled a lot by people, and they got rained on, they got torn up in the field and all that. We're lucky to find this, and it's just a taste of history. The next one, please. So talking about the point system again, how we arrive at these points. Basically, you're using a tape measure for the most common way of measuring the circumference, and you do that at 4.5 feet. And of course, there are exceptions to every rule, especially in science. You can't get away from that, and we'll talk about these in a minute. But generally speaking, the straightforward thing is to measure with a tape measure. And like I said, whatever that circumference is in inches is the points for the circumference. And then height, back in the day when they didn't have lasers and even tape measures at first, there were different ways of doing things. And there was what was called the stick method. And I guess this is what they employed. Basically you're using a stick to get the rough height of the tree. And that method is still used today in the Biltmore stick. But again, it was put into practice a lot more than I guess the foresters had planned. People were trying to figure out how tall a tree was they were measuring. But in any case, you could read about that online. I'm not going to get into the details, and it's hard to do. It takes practice. But we don't do the stick method. We use lasers. So basically, you're looking at the height of the tree. The tallest part of the tree should be above the trunk. If it isn't, you have to make a modification, and it gets more difficult with trees that are this kind of shape. And you have to get the right angle and a clear view of the top of the crown. And again, it should be directly over the trunk, where you have to measure the distance from a different location. You try to get right under the top of the tree. And then, of course, you take the area of the crown. And basically, you're looking at from the top of the tree, you have an X and a Y axis that you look at, and you have to start somewhere. I like to pick at the widest part of the tree, and then go 90 degrees, to the Y axis or whatever. And then you take that number and total it, and then divide by 2. And of course, then you have to take 25% of that, and that's your points for crown spread. And again, it's easy in some instances, not so much in others. And when you're in the forest with a lot of trees around, it's hard to separate that. You need binoculars, and maybe a certain time of year is better than others. But middle of summer in July and August is not fun with the bugs and everything. But anyway, I digress. Next slide. So this is some of the equipment that's in use today. There again, I mentioned the tape measure, and you could also do the spread of the tree with the tape measure. You're not going to measure the height of the tree with a tape measure unless you like to climb. But usually you're using the laser these days, but you can use a clinometer. and the clinometers take practice. It measures the angle, and you can convert to height. Very easy to do and figure out, but practice is important because it varies on the person using it, and what they're pointing at. And again, you have to factor in where the top of the tree is, because you're measuring the distance. The disadvantage with the clinometer is the easiest way to use it is to measure 100 feet or 100 meters if you're using the metric from the tree, and then your reading of the percent of the angle is the exact height of the tree. So you can see where the problems arise when you're measuring the distance from the trunk, and the height of the tree is actually further away than what you're measuring. So you're off. And the same thing happens with the laser. You have to point the laser at the top of the tree, and it really depends on where the top of the tree is. So you have to be in a position to deduct or add feet if to the distance if the crown is not in line. The top of the crown is not in line with the trunk. And then of course we do the GPS location, which is critically important. We want to be able to go back to that tree. And if you don't have the exact location, it's hard to do. So we use a satellite technology. Works out great. But it's just one more thing to remember. And sometimes you can get apps on your cell phone. You could use your cell phone for doing GPS locations. Also good for taking pictures if you don't have a camera. So smartphones come in pretty handy for the measurers. And then there's other equipment that's not shown here, like a caliper. If you have like a bifurcated trunk, that's a trunk that's forked. And you're only allowed to measure the largest one if it's a normal, a tree that is commonly found with a single trunk, which is important to remember. And if the tree is divided below 4.5 feet, then you're supposed to take the measurement of the largest trunk. You can't go down to the base of the tree if it's commonly a single trunk tree. You have to go at 4.5 feet and measure that one trunk. Now the exception to that is there are species of trees that commonly divide below 4.5 feet, and there's an allowance where you can go back. We decide that, not the homeowner, or landowner, necessarily the measuring team. They should ask if there's a question about this, because it gets into controversy sometimes. Especially when the landowner is upset and he's like, I thought I had a champion. Now you're saying it's only going to be this number of points. But we have to be diplomats too in these cases, and usually they understand. But it can be problematic sometimes. Next slide, please.
Well, and also I'd like to add one comment. We would love to get into the drone measurement of having a drone. We haven't quite gotten there yet financially or with experience, but that's going to be our next step, I hope.
I have one and I'm practicing.
Yes, Jim's our leader on that. All right, so I want to talk about this particular tree. This one's in Baltimore County, and it's a white oak. It's beautiful. The Big Tree program is interested in any tree that registers 300 points or more. It's automatically in the program. And this one was in a little development. It was clearly saved from many, many years ago. But in 1976, the DNR went out and said, well, let's do a bicentennial tree list. And they published a list. It was in the libraries and other places. And we still keep up with that list today. This is one of those trees. It's still alive. So these were ones that were alive in 1776 that made it to 1976. And of course, we're coming up to our semi-quincentennial year in 2026. So now I started looking into what bicentennial trees are still alive. I'm from Montgomery County. We had 24 bicentennial trees, and to date we only have one left. So there are other counties that have a few more left, but this is a beautiful one in Baltimore, and it's just in front of this house, and we were really glad it was saved. So this serves as our bicentennial tree from that county. And it's an absolutely gorgeous tree. It has that perfect shape. It's a real strong crown on it. It just looks fantastic. So this is really a lovely, lovely example. I also want to talk about, this is a Maryland state champion, because not only do we involve ourselves with a national champion tree list, but with a Maryland state list. And each county, most counties have their own list as well. So this is, we know, is in Baltimore County's largest tree. It's in Baldwin on private property. And the young lady in the picture is a friend of one of my daughters. And she kept saying, oh, my husband and I are living in this little farmhouse on the back of the property, and there's this huge tree there. And I drove up there with the measuring crew, and I couldn't find the tree. Well, we were on the other side of the house. And I walked around the corner and I about collapsed, because this is what we found. You can see the circumference was 24 feet and 2 inches in circumference, and the total is 431. So there she is, the owner by that tree, and it's just a fantastic cottonwood. It's the largest known in the state, so that's our state champion. And if we choose to, when the national champion list starts collecting their data again, I think we'll be sending this one in. I don't know if it'll make that list or not, but I'll at least get it on the register for them, because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous tree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this just shows you that not all champion trees are big. It's big for the species, but 30 points and it became a national champion, because this tree just doesn't get that big. This is called the shadbush, or the Canadian serviceberry, and it's in my yard. So sometimes you tell people that you never know what you have. If you can't identify what trees are there, then you may end up sitting on a national champion or a state champion or a county champion, not even know it. But this is of course, a state champion and a county champion as well. But here's one of those things where you're measuring. Where do you measure this tree? Well, the tree is not commonly a single trunk tree. We can go below, and you can see this was bifurcated at one time, and there's a hole where the other stem was. But I was allowed to measure in that location, which is 12 inches above ground. And the tree is only 17 feet high, and crown spread was 7 feet, average crown spread. So a quarter of that didn't give many points. But it just goes to show you that there are trees out there, and I'm currently considering a blueberry and a pinkster azalea, sometimes called swamp azalea. So that they might ultimately be on the registry, but they're contestants, let's just say, at this point. Yeah. So just to make the point, there's a lot of small ones out there that are being overlooked.
But this is also a national champion, which is why we really wanted to put it in here, because we don't like to measure trees under 150 points unless they're a native tree, or if there's a reason to make, because it's accessible to the public. This one is not, of course, but it still is the largest known in the nation at this point.
Yeah. And that picture on the right-hand side with that big double trunk tree, that's not the serviceberry. It has a little red tape halfway up the tree, and you can see the ruler behind it, and you can see the flowers just barely, the top quarter of the slide. And so that was it, and that was in the middle of the swamp, and I had to get out there with planks, 50 feet of planks, to get out to where it was and measure it. So we can be dedicated at times, but
dedicated or a little at the top too. All right, this is a national champion. Baltimore County seems to have their share today. It's a catalpa. It's a southern catalpa. It's on a crossroads area, so I don't know if it was ever a marker tree. But one of the issues we had in this, if you see in the picture on the left, on the right side of the picture, there's a branch that comes out. It's very thick, and that was at about 4.5 feet. So what we chose to do in measuring it is we went just under that, where we didn't include the root flare or the branch flare. because it was the narrowest point below that. So you can see this is 347 points. It's a gorgeous tree. I want to see it in bloom one day. That's going to be one of my goals. I haven't seen it in bloom, but it is a magnificent tree and it's absolutely beautiful. So this is a really nice tree. And it's prized because of its size. So this is the largest known in the United States.
Mm. Oh, okay. So, who says Caroline County doesn't have anything
Yeah.
big? This is the largest tree in, I think that as far as Caroline County goes. Is it a state champion or is it just
It's not the state champion,
okay? Well, it's the
but
big.
this is the historic end of it.
So this tree is referred to as a witness tree, and the whole point is it's fun to, if you can attach a story to a tree, it's all the better. And this tree has quite a story attached to it. This is Harriet Tubman, of course, is a famous person that had established the Underground Railroad and trying to get slaves to freedom. And this property where this tree was part of that network, a very important part. And her descendants, one being seen there in the picture, is who bought the property. And so this is a descendant of Harriet Tubman. And then of course, they wanted to show the tree to everybody and all that. And some college students from Morgan State, I think it was this student, came up with the idea, let's call it the witness tree, because it witnessed the slaves being freed, obviously. And then so we took great pride in going out and measuring. And I went out because I'm in Caroline County. I lived there, and I just had to see it. And besides, I had the state champion, or not the state. I had the county champion before this tree came up, and it ruined me. But yeah, the 300. Anytime you get into 300 points, you're looking at an impressive tree, and the diameter of this tree is almost 6 feet, at 4.5 feet. So, and almost 120 feet tall. So this was a towering giant, and really, really incredible to see. You can see this little website at the bottom there. If you want more information on this, you can get on that website and learn all about it. Flight to Freedom.
It also talks about that Harriet Tubman worked on this particular farm and this property. She was rented out by her owner to work on this farm, and that's the trees on this property, which is why the students call it the witness tree. They believe it had to be seen by the people she was working with, and it was really a tremendous tree to visit and to measure.
It's also called the tulip tree or the tulip poplar, but a lot of common names associated. Next.
Okay. Oh, this is I think my personal favorite tree, and since I put this program together, I really wanted to share this one. This one landed me heading to England. I got a email one day from an elm expert in Brighton, England, in Hove, Brighton, England, and he said, "I wonder if my trees are bigger than yours or vice versa." And I went out and measured it for him. And he said, "Oh, ours were very small because it's a seaside town and the wind is a constant battle. And so they're very short. This one's down in a little depression area. So it's just a little bit protected. And in between the time I measured it the first time and the second, it topped out a little bit. And that topped out piece was so big that the county road crews took it over to our Smith Center, where they have the outdoor education program, and it's part of the playground now. It's that big of a piece that the kids can crawl under and over on it, and it's still there today. But I finally went over to visit this gentleman in England, and he showed me 2 trees. They were called the Preston twins, and they were planted during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, and they had a circumference about the same. I can't say whether they were planted the same year, but we did some little thinking and thought that the tree probably was brought over from Kent area, the Kent County in England. We believe there was a mill in this area, so maybe it was a marker for a mill. But in doing the research and talking to other elm experts that we were able to do, they designated this as the world's largest known. This was is a housing development. A veterinarian wanted to preserve this tree and bought that lot and preserved the tree and donated it to Montgomery County for a park. And Pepco, our power company, even moved the power lines to the other side of the roadway to give this tree a little more protection. And you may recall, a year or so ago, when a plane ran into those electric wire towers and it was very near this. And my first thought, of course, was for the pilot and the passengers who were alive and in the planes up on this thing. But my second thought was, I wonder how near they are to the tree. So that's kind of my selfish way of thinking about it. But this is a magnificent tree. You could see the 431 points, a millennium tree, and it is publicly accessible, which is, I mean, we'll measure trees on private or publicly on land, but the ones on publicly on land, we really love to share because we know that people will go visit it. And this is just a few miles, maybe 3 miles from my house. So we designate it as the world's largest known English elm. This is another spectacular tree. This one is in Cecil County. It is a bicentennial tree. It's included in that 1976 program. And it's also a Penn's wood tree. And there are several books about Penn's wood trees that when William Penn came over here, there was an area all of Pennsylvania, and it included a little bit of Delaware and a little bit of Maryland. And this is one of the few trees that is still left from this time. It's at a local meeting house, and they do allow the public to come visit it. There's a school behind it off to the left side, and the meeting house is to the right. And that's 406 points. When the Y oak, which is the largest tree ever measured in Maryland at, what was it, 506 points, I think, something like that. We have 2 that were at 499, one in Hartford County, and I can't remember where the other one was. Anyway, I know, it's Montgomery County. And the one in Howard County collapsed. And so it didn't get to go over to the 500, but this one has a ways to go for that designation, but it's still a magnificent tree. This is the state tree of Maryland. This is the one that actually replaced the Y oak. We had another one up here in Barnesville that was designated a white oak, and in one winter storm, we lost power up here for about 4 days. And I had worked with the governor's office to get a designation and hold a meeting and make this new tree into the state tree. And when my power came back on, I had one message from the governor's office saying, yes, he'll do this. Let's set a date. Let's get it set up. And the owner had written to me and saying it had collapsed during that storm. So this was the one that was picked after that. And it is a spectacular tree. So this is the tree to go see. And if you go to our website, it will, if it's a publicly accessible tree, you can get coordinates and addresses for the tree. So I highly recommend visiting this one. If you're traveling anywhere along 95, take a few minutes and zip off and see it. It's just gorgeous. So this is, these are some of our measuring people. We don't have them in every county, but we do, we have a committee that we all combined and mix up and go out, we go camping with people and measure trees along the way. And so these are just some of our people who volunteer for us. We all work on a volunteer basis. None of us are paid. We sometimes get a little reimbursement for mileage, but really it's just for the love of the trees. And every time I find a new one or a big one, I just feel like I've had another baby, because it's just so fantastic to think what these trees have seen and heard and witnessed. So I just wanted to share some really neat pictures of friends that we've all worked with. All right, Jim.
Yeah. we alluded to this earlier in the presentation, where nature throws curveballs at us sometimes, and these diagrams were taken from, I believe, the American Forest Tree Measurement Guide, which is that they held the registry for the national champions up until a year or two ago. And it's, it's going to a university now to take charge of it. But getting to the point, you can see that there's trees come in a lot of different forms. And what we do in Maryland isn't necessarily what is done nationally. And we try to be a little more inclusive and just not rule things out based on, a bifurcated trunk or a multiple trunk. And you're encountering it more and more now because, a lot of trees that were cut, 100 years ago are now becoming big again, and there are multiple trunks because they commonly coppice, and grow multiple trunks after they've been cut. Not all trees do that, but a lot of the major timber trees do, that are hardwoods. And basically, when you're killing a softwood, cutting a softwood, you're killing it unless it's capable of resprouting. When there's a couple that are capable of doing that are found in Maryland, actually. But anyway, you can see all the different types of trunks here. And at 4.5 feet, you have all these challenges, and then you factor in a slope where part of the trunk is in water. It gets to be a big headache, but we deal with it. Usually, when you know where the root crown is, you're in water. That's you're basically starting there. For the measurement of the trunk going up 4.5 feet from that point. It slopes. What in Maryland we do is we basically measure on the high side or the low side, and we take a point halfway to the middle, as is demonstrated in this diagram, and this is the mid slope. So in other words, when the low side of the slope, we're measuring 4.5 feet up, and on the high side of the slope, we're measuring 4.5 feet up, and then we're basically averaging it. So that's how that's done. And then trees that are multiple stemmed or have 2 leaders at 4.5 feet, as you see in the double trunk tree diagram or the picture, has the yellow lines to point out that there are definitely 2 piths there, the pith test, they call it. National champions would disqualify this tree. In Maryland, if you don't see light at 4.5 feet, we accept it. Mm-hmm. If the tree's form is one that is a single leader tree normally, we allow the measurement at 4.5 feet if you don't see light at that point. So obviously it has to be the same tree. It has to be the same individual. Usually this is a stump sprout or something like that, which just appears to be the case in this picture. But in this way, we're more inclusive. So we're not upsetting a lot of people, and we're trying to standardize the measurement of these trees to make it fair. But there's always going to be an element that says it's not fair and all that. But now, if we were doing, if this was a national potential champion with one trunk being big enough to be a champion, then they would have to measure it differently than with the tape, and that's where some of these other methods come in. So it's not always possible to measure a tree with a tape, but more often than not, we make it work. But sometimes it's not possible. And in this case, you can measure just real quick. You can measure the complete circumference, and then you can caliper the 2 trunks at that 4.5 point, and then you could determine the one that's not eligible, what the area of that trunk is, and subtract it from the total area, and then reconvert the diameter. So that's possible. That's one way of doing it. But so these are some of the challenges that we encounter. And I mentioned earlier, when you're taking the height of the tree and the top of the tree, the crown is not in line with the trunk, and yet you're taking the distance from the trunk as part of creating that triangle to determine height. Your numbers are going to be off. Yeah. So there's adjustments that have to be made in different things, and like I said, in trying to get a canopy spread in a forest, and it's taking a lot longer than you thought it would for doing that particular tree. But That's part comes with the territory, and you always have that landowner, the owner wanting to get that number as high as they can, and so tagging along, helping you, and we invite the help. I mean, they might know where the crown ends, and we can't see it, so we don't take their word for it. We still don't check it, but they can help move things along for us. You have anything you want to add to that, Jolie?
No, I think you covered it really well. It's the high and low in the middle and averaging. I mean, it can be a quandary. It takes us a while sometimes to figure it out.
Someone could have a specific question, and you could look us up online. Sure. Time after this presentation, they could give us a challenge or something.
Well, even on the American Forest website, you can still download this guide. It was done by Bob Leverett from the University of Massachusetts, and he gets into great detail. So that is publicly available.
Mm-hmm.
We want to thank, as I said, everybody is volunteer. We volunteer our time. And these are the people who work so hard to help us and keep us with some funding, and we really, really treasure the work and that they care about this, and we do too. And so it doesn't cost the tree owner anything to have this done, and all of us who do it I would say, are extremely dedicated. So the next thing is, how do you nominate a tree? Anyone can nominate a tree. You don't have to own it, but we do have to have a permission or to come on the property to measure the tree. If it's yours, of course, we want your signature on that. And if it's not yours, we'll get the owner's signature ourselves. But we want the information there. This is on our website. You can download it and fill it out and send it in. If you send it to DNR, it can eventually get to us, but you can do this right online now. So you can go in, and no one can fill out the form completely. It helps us if you can give us a circumference, and we'll help you determine what genus and species the tree is, and we'll take it from there. So this is a way for people to participate, and we're always looking for volunteers, and anyone who finds an interest in this, please contact me through the website. When you send these in, these actually come to another person and myself, and we dish them out and handle them between the two of us. So I'd be glad to respond if you put, I was on this program and I'm interested. I'll be glad to get back to you. So Jim, I don't know if you have any final thoughts, and then maybe we can go to some questions.
Yeah, okay. I think we got questions. Thanks.
All right, I don't know how to unshare. Whoops. Oh. Oh, there we go. So that's our program in a nutshell. There are definitely more tools and equipment out there and things you can learn and read, but definitely check out the websites. I'm Montgomery County, so we have one for the Montgomery County website, and then we have one for the state, and some other counties do too, and some don't. So it's out there.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we have a couple in the queue, but yeah, thank you for a great kickoff to the discussion. So Bruce was asking, I have seen non-native trees on the register. Will we continue to register them?
Well, as Julie alluded to earlier, we do take non-native trees, but we put a limit of 150 points on any new additions, unless there's at least 4 trees in the registry of that species. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jolie, but I think that's right. That's cool. We're not taking any new native trees unless they're at least 150 points to the registry. So we had to cut back on that because we already have the largest registry in the country, and it would be even larger if we took all these trees and we're just volunteers, and we can't do all these trees. So we had to draw the line somewhere. So that's where, but to answer your question, yes, we still take non-native trees, but they either have to be grandfathered or they have to be over 150 points if it's a new species.
But I was mortified when a couple of people sent in Bradford pears and then I said, okay, there's 4 on there. I guess I'll go measure this one more. I mean, I cringed, but we had to follow protocol. So there, yes, there are some out there. And if it's native, we'll accept any points. So, you know, Jim had the smallest national champion, I think, so.
Yeah, I don't want to put Baltimore City on blast, but I have a declaration on my wall honoring a large, a
Yes,
significant local calorie pair, and yeah.
yes, it's in that park. I can't remember the name of the
Yep.
park, but yeah, you do. Sorry about that.
Well, you know, and we recognize, even, you know, with the Natural Areas program, we still recognize that even a non-native, even an invasive tree does offer some shade, some flooding mitigation. It's, you know, it is what it is. We had another question from Bruce that may or may not have been addressed already. He put this in before you had the section on kind of the nature's woes slide. But he was asking about the policy for registering multi-stem trees. And it's been a concern for comparing multi-stem trees to single stems. So I don't know if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, we have a subcommittee that has been deliberating over this, and right now the current policy that I mentioned stands. It's being debated, and the bottom line is we want to remain inclusive. So whatever we end up doing is not going to take away from people that already have trees in the registry. We're hoping that anyway. But yes, so if you measure a tree that's multi-trunked, that division has to be above 4.5 feet. If it's a tree, its common form is a single trunk. And if it's not, then you have to measure whatever is above 4.5 feet. I mean, you can't see light between leaders. And you can end up measuring 1, 2, or 3, or, you know, however many there are. But we don't have a way of doing that easily. You know, it's the caliper method where you know, you're taking area of the determining the area of the trunk. They call that basal area in forestry when you're doing it at 4.5 feet. You can get total basal area, and then you can take out the part of the tree that doesn't qualify. So this is one of the things that's being deliberated over, but the policy is such now that we're taking most trees that are multi-trunked as long as they divide above 4.5 feet, and then it depends on how big the remaining leaders are that are being included. Hope that answers your question.
And then we already have a system where if somebody nominates a tree that's too small, what's too small? And we always, our rule of thumb is if the tree is within 70% of the champion in the state, we'll accept it unless there's not unless that species is not in that county, we'll go to 60%. So that means we're just not gonna, I mean, we already have 150 white oaks on the list already. You know, we don't need smaller ones. And so that's very important too, to make sure that the tree is at least 70. We'll sometimes make little exceptions if it's just a couple points off us, but we go through a list. Is it publicly accessible? You know, I mean, so we try and keep it not so overburdened with trees that are smaller, but below that 70%, we don't put them on the list. So that's just a little aside, but.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, Lou Meyer has a question. Are there any specific counties that are underrepresented on the list where there may be some undiscovered giants?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement. Probably, I'm thinking of Somerset County. Has very few. We are now going to the Eastern Shore. Charles County has a good list, but I've been doing Gary and I've been doing those for a couple of years. So it's some of those outlying counties that don't have a lot. Allegheny doesn't have a whole lot. Garrett County's really come online with the program. They have a wonderful people doing some measuring and work up there. So it's just these ones that seem to be at the far ends of each state that tend to be a little up, you know, underrepresented. But we're open to nominations anytime, any place, anywhere. So yes, we definitely we definitely do have some upper, those are probably the two that have the least amount. When you
Great.
go on our website, you can go down to, if you click on the tree listing, and then you go down to a filter, you can put, you can get a drop down and you'll get what counties, and you can get the numbers from each county. We have about 4,000 trees on the list. Some of those aren't alive anymore, but we keep them just for records, or especially if it's a historical tree. But anyway, there are ways to filter through each one of the counties and get the parameters that you want in a search, in a sort.
Excellent. So touching back on, the great deal of volunteer labor that is necessary to keep this going, how do people get involved? Like, how do they get trained up if they want to be a measurer?
Oh, good question. It's not a fast process. We every once in a while will put together a work day where we have people come, but the people who are really stay on and are serious. I mean, I had a young person actually come from Montgomery County, again, my county, and he's been measuring with us for 3 years. Well, I trust him to go completely out. We have to go on teams of 2 to keep each other honest. Not that anybody's not being honest, but we're supposed to go in teams of 2, and for safety as well. But anyway, so he's been working about 3 years, and he learned how to do it, and he finally we got him a laser, and so he's really come a long way. But it's not something you can just do in a couple hours. It does take some time, because you can go out a whole day and not run into any of the situations that we were sharing. And that's, I usually, when I do that, I take people to certain trees and say, okay, what would you do with this tree? But until you really encounter it, you kind of stand there and talk about it. So we do have a contact us on the website, if you want to contact us, and that comes directly into my household as well. So if somebody wants to just get on the website and hit contact us, I'm interested. We'd be more than glad to go through and see, and talk about it and see if there's interest in doing this.
And on the same topic, I would love to hear about how the two of you got involved and trained up in doing measurement.
Oh, I was asked by a man, I think he's got to be the oldest in our volunteer program. He's 92. I was out measuring with him on Tuesday in the District of Columbia, and he begged me to come on to the forestry board. And I said, oh my gosh, I was president of the PTA, and he finally talked me into it. And I think I've received the nicest compliment I ever got was, he said, the best thing I've done for the program is to bring you onto the forestry board. And people are going to know him. His name is Joe Howard, and he was a teacher and principal in Montgomery County, and he started the outdoor education program for Montgomery County. So he's a well-known character, is what I can say, but God love him. He's out there helping me measure trees, and he's wonderful. So he's the one that brought me into this, and the next thing I know, I meet Jim.
Yeah, I got started in when I was in Georgia for 9 years, and I was helping the forestry department in Camden County, which is a further southeast corner where all the nuclear missiles are, Kings Bay. But anyway, we had this farm, and it was 600 acres, and there was some nice trees in there, and I got interested in the trees then, and I called the gentleman up in the local forest station, and he came out and agreed with me on some of the ways we were measuring the trees and species and everything we were looking at. And a couple of them are still in the records. But anyway, we sold the farm, and I was going to move back to Maryland, and I called DNR up in Maryland, and I said, how do I get involved in volunteering in forestry? And they put me in touch with the Anne Arundel Forestry Board, and I became a member in 2004, and it worked out. From there, as long as I lived in Anne Arundel County up until 2 years ago, and then when we moved to Caroline County, I got involved with their board and been helping them ever since. And very interested in not just the big tree, but everything, all the volunteer work that the association does, which is why I was president for almost 11 years. And Joe Lee was kind enough to relieve me. But yeah, we have a system now. We can rotate people in, and you don't have to spend so long in there. But yeah, there's a lot to do, and it's exciting. You know, Maryland is such a diverse state for its size. So there's really a lot of things you can do, and I encourage people to get out there and visit all these parks that Essley helped create 100 years ago, and see what they have to offer in terms of the trees and other amenities. Incredible. You know, every park has something new to offer depending on what part of the state you're in. So you know, and can't thank DNR enough, and the Maryland Forestry Foundation for its support, undying support, and without the help that we get from the state and the foundation, we wouldn't be able to do as well as we're doing. Yeah. But it makes you proud to see that you get the respect in other states. They want to know how we're doing things, and it's very good that you make a mark, and you're seeing not just Maryland, but you see other forests in different states benefit from what we're doing here. So we look forward to making it continue to grow the program, and to do that you need more volunteers. So everything comes around.
Yeah, and as Bruce added into the chat, you can also join your local forestry board to learn how to measure and to get involved and to volunteer, right, which I think is a great point as we start to wrap things up. Just want to thank you two again. This was a really great discussion, and I especially always love learning about the cool historical trees and their individual stories. So thank you so much for sharing about the program and sharing about those trees.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having
me. Of course. And I'll turn it back over to Gary for the last couple minutes.
Thank you very much, Megan, and thank all of you for joining us in today's program. I specifically want to thank Jolie and Jim for the excellent presentation and overview they provided of the Maryland Big Tree Program. Clearly, not only a precedent-setting program for the state of Maryland, but one where the volunteers involved today have helped taken good care in helping it continue to mature and serve not only the state of Maryland, but as an example for the whole nation. We look forward next year to celebrating your 100th anniversary. I did want to mention in closing today's webinar, two kinds of activities that the foundation's been involved in. One is just concluded, but only in one sense beginning, and the other one is one that we're really looking forward to in July of this year. The one that was just announced and is now kind of maturing is the fact that just a little over a week ago, the Washington Metropolitan Council of Governments, which consists of 27 local governments in the Washington metropolitan area, recall that is the nation's capital, adopted an urban tree canopy goal, the first multi-nation urban regional goal in the nation. And it is ambitious. It's 50%. The good news is that the current tree cover for the entire 2.2 million acre area covered by the 27 local jurisdictions I've just mentioned, which make up COG, is 49.6% of that region. Kind of surprising to many of us. But the real threat is that the region is losing over 10,000 acres a year in the pressures for new development in the nation's capital region. The net effect is that if we are to preserve that level of coverage and provide it as an important qualification for the quality of life for those living in this area, then we're going to have to work collaboratively to plant a whole lot more trees. And so we've also provided COG not only a goal, which they have embraced, but a committee composed of regional urban foresters whose job it is to adjust these goals and expectations depending on the broadest 18 regional planning factors that are used in the local planning and zoning process by the 27 local members of COG. So we're very pleased that the foundation representing Maryland and some of the other local jurisdictions that we've worked with have been part of that process. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is something we're really, really excited about because it is, we think, the golden ticket for high school students in this summer's experience. And we urge you to not only give thought to it, but to share it widely. And that is, for the first time, again, to our knowledge in the United States, we'll be offering a urban forestry careers camp on the University of Maryland. It's patterned after the successful experience that the Forestry Board Association has been sponsoring for over 70 years. That's the Natural Resources Careers Camp held each summer in Garrett County, Maryland. This one is going to be the urban example of this kind of an experience, looking to help educate high school students about what kind of job prospects are out there in the future for them, what kind of elements go into being and seeking a career in urban forestry, and what kind of college programs are available for enrollment if they seek a future career in this area. The full information for the application is on the MarylandForestryFoundation.org website. The program itself will take place on campus in July, between July 7th and 13th. So we want to get as many applications in as possible. This is the first year of a 3-year pilot. And so it's kind of a shakedown cruise for many of us. But for the attendees and those who enroll in the program, you're going to find it's a wonderful experience. And the new director of the program is also a former local urban forester, now the head of public works for Hyattsville, right in the Washington metropolitan area. Her name is Leslie Riddick. So we invite you to join Leslie, myself, and many others that you'll want to invite and get to meet on campus this summer. And we're looking for appropriate high school applicants. If you're a freshman maturing up to a sophomore or a senior graduating this year, you're an eligible applicant. Please join us and share the information widely and go to the MarylandForestryFoundation.org website. Again, I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Jolie and Jim for their very enlightening assistance in helping present it. Wonderful slide presentation to share the information you had. And for those of you, again, who are interested in becoming involved in the Big Tree program, look for the Big Tree website directly, or you can find a link to it through the Maryland Forestry Foundation website. Megan, thank you for your excellent work in moderating the session. We hope all of you will join us next month on the third Thursday when we'll look at the state's goals in environmental protection and tree expansion and how we reconcile the commitments made over the last half decade by the state of Maryland. Join us next month for Framing the Future. We're pleased to have all of you. See you then. Bye-bye.